There we go, that's a little better. So, welcome. Today or tonight I should say, we're going to go through a couple of things. One is a really great book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. We're going to kind of build some context around that with respect to kind of like my own personal canon, if you will, that I built out, which includes all these books and a few others. And I'm going to share with you just some ways with which I maintain a journaling practice for my art, which includes some little ballpoint pen sketches. You may have checked some of these out with some of the videos that I posted on my channel, and also oil painting journal, and more recently started watercolor journaling. So I'll share some of that. We should be able to wrap that up within about 30 minutes or so. And well, appreciate you checking out my video. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch my camera, and we're gonna jump into a quick book summary. There we go. So once again, picked up this book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. And it's a real interesting read. It is a longer book, but it goes pretty fast. So I think all in all, it's about 404 pages or so. I'm not one really I don't take well to longer books. Usually I lose my attention after about 120 to 220 pages, but this one held my attention. And hopefully by the time we're done here, you'll get a sense for why. Also, perhaps maybe you'll get a sense for why, I kind of consider it a key part of my canon, if you will, or the limited number of books that, I go back to or intend to go back to, either for reference or guidance, or just to look at with a kind of a through the new lens as time passes. So when we look at this book, if you've checked out perhaps maybe my book summary for Steven Pressfield's book, The Art of War, there's a lot of similarities and overlaps between these two books. And I'll actually run through some of my thoughts as it relates to some of those items. But let's dig into this right off the bat. In the opening page here, there's a quote, and you'll see kind of examples of how I take my notes. And this is all based upon the strategy for synthesizing and summarizing and sharing information about great books that we come across, that I gleaned from Tim Sanders' book, Love is the Killer App. One of the many valuable things that he provides in here is kind of a framework for approaching synthesizing knowledge gained and insights gained from books like this. So you'll see some examples of that in my notes, because I took a lot of notes almost on every page. There's this quote right off the bat: the objective isn't to make art, it is to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable, which is a quote by Robert Henry, who admittedly I recognize the name, but didn't know much about him. He was a painter at the turn of the century, 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, mostly known for his portraiture work. He was a painter. He studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Art, which is a wonderful art school in Philadelphia. I've actually taken a couple of workshops there. And he was known for his portraiture. I think the Vanderbilts commissioned some work from him, so he was pretty big for his time, but a great quote, and that really is a great objective, and that really is the objective of this book. The objective here is to help create a way for us to look at living that helps put us in that realm of being able to create art easily. And when we go through this, if we look at what would amount to the table of contents, he technically, I guess, I assume that these were chapters, but he calls them 78 areas of thought. And this is kind of in line with how the book is organized. I alluded to the fact that I would consider this, in as far as its effect on the reader, especially somebody who's creative, very similar to Steven Pressfield's book, The Art of War. It's very motivating. It gives you some really good tools to help stay motivated and kind of in the zone, so you can continue to be creative over a long period of time and sustain that. But where it's different, it's much more philosophical. I would liken these two books, if I were to compare them, and I'll go into a little bit more of a detailed comparison in a moment. This is almost like Zen Buddhism, this particular book, this Rick Rubin's book. It's very philosophical and very detailed, versus if you were to compare Zen Buddhism to, perhaps maybe, the Protestant work ethic, if you could encapsulate that into a book, that might be Steven Pressfield's book, The Art of War. So they're different but the same. And again, there's 78 areas of thought that range from everyone, and they're all short. These are short chapters, if that's what we want to call them. Everybody is a creator, tuning in, the source of creativity, awareness, habits, seeds, self-awareness, play, the gatekeeper, why we make art, or why make art, harmony, what we tell ourselves, how to choose, shades and degrees, apocrypha, tuning out, undermining voices, self-awareness, whispers out of time, expect a surprise, so on and so forth. There is just a ton of really good stuff here. Now, if I were to summarize this book, I would say, The Creative Act, A Way of Being, by Rick Rubin, explores essentially the essence of creativity, drawing from his experience in the music industry. If you're not familiar with him, the author, Rick Rubin, is a music producer. He's worked with artists ranging from, I believe, Red Hot Chili Peppers to perhaps maybe Aerosmith and Run DMC, all the way on up to, I believe, even Adele. So, and if I'm mistaken on any of those, forgive me, but he's worked with some really big time talent in the music industry, and he's quite a creative guy himself. And the book delves into various aspects of creativity. It offers insights on finding inspiration, cultivating a creative mindset, that's really the key there, navigating collaboration. Some of his thoughts on collaboration are really cool, and overcoming creative blocks through anecdotes from Rubin's collaborations with artists, and I would say also stories from artists from the past. Some of them still are around, but perhaps maybe their peak creativity periods from the past, like the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and specific thoughts that are insights into John Lennon's songwriting process, and so on and so forth. Some really cool stuff. And through these anecdotes, the book provides very practical guidance on nurturing creativity across all different facets of life. It serves as a source of inspiration and advice for those seeking to embrace and enhance their creative expression. So when we look at this compared to The Art of War by Steven Pressfield, while both The Art of War and The Creative Act, A Way of Being, focus on creativity, they approach the subject from different perspectives. Within The Art of War, the approach Pressfield's book kind of takes, it addresses the concept of resistance as a main focus within the book, both internal and external forces that hinder creativity and encourage overcoming procrastination and self-doubt to unleash one's creative potential. And there's themes within that book. It explores challenges artists face, all kinds of artists, not just writers like Pressfield, but also painters and actors and producers and so on and so forth, and sculptors. And the importance he focuses on of discipline is really a key aspect of his book, and the battle against resistance to achieve creative success. He actually, I've heard him in multiple interviews, sees creative life as warfare, and the opponent is resistance. So when it comes to style, Pressfield combines practical advice with a motivational tone, drawing heavily upon his own experience as a writer, who, by the way, had a lot of challenges early on, both personally and also professionally, struggled for, I think, 30 years before he actually saw any kind of measurable success, at least in his own eyes, commercially and creatively. And I think his first big success was The Legend of Bagger Vance, which became a pretty big screenplay and movie. But he wrote that. Now, the creative act, comparatively, the approach there, Rubin, as a music producer, offers insights into creativity through his experiences in the music industry. And the book, kind of embraces a more holistic approach to creativity, drawing from, diverse collaborative experience that he has. And his work made, kind of delve into finding inspiration, fostering a creative mindset, and navigating the collaborative process in creative endeavors. And I guess that might stem from, trying to work with, top talent as opposed to being, a solitary creator, coming up with his own stuff. And when it comes to the style, Rubin, uses anecdotes again from his collaborations with artists, and it is very philosophical in nature, almost reading like, writings that would come right out of a broad philosophical perspective like Zen Buddhism. All right, so there's a lot more there, but I want to jump into the structure of this book a little bit more and share, some more insights into what we have here. So, I've dog-eared just about every other page, and I have additional tabs and notes everywhere. And, I'm going to just pinpoint a few things that jump out at me, and I'll actually read some of them, and I will provide at a later date a brief 10-minute summary of this book, along with a written book brief like I have for all the other books that I've gone through. But I just wanted to jump ahead and add this to the Wednesday walkthrough and add some additional context as it relates to other, some of the other important books, that I turn to. So here's an excerpt that's interesting. Right off the bat, in the first chapter, Rubin suggests that to live as an artist is a way of being in the world. So you can see already kind of a more holistic point of view. He's not talking about warfare against resistance. It's a way of perceiving, a practice of paying attention, refining our sensitivity to tune into the more subtle notes, looking for what draws us in and what pushes us away. Noticing what feeling tones arise when they and where they lead. Attuned choice by attuning choice, or attuned choice by attuned choice, I should say. Your entire life is a form of self-expression. You exist as a creative being in a creative universe, a singular work of art. So, a lot of the writing here kind of reflects that same type of sentiment. Again, very philosophical. And there's a lot here. Obviously, with over 70 chapters, you're bound to find a nugget of value here and there. But there's a ton here. So we'll dive into a handful more. Here's one that I think is quite interesting. This section, Submerge the Great Works. He talks about essentially intentionally setting up your filters. So you're taking in information intentionally that's going to support your creativity and lead you in a direction you want to go. Said a few other ways, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're taking in, binge watching, trash TV and, listening to the news and, cranky talk radio hosts all the time, it's gonna negatively impact your filter when it comes to, how you process information and kind of tune in to, the information that you want to pay attention to, and it's going to negatively impact your ability to produce the kind of art that you want to produce. So, yeah, that's kind of this chapter in a nutshell, but there's other facets to it. Just in this little, 1.5 page section here, all the chapters for the most part are pretty short, pretty brief. He also hits upon, diving into a wide array of, high quality artwork, whether it be reading classic literature and focusing in on that genre, or visiting museums and looking at great artwork, and also even copying. So, kind of leads me to maybe point out the process of filtering in and honing in and digesting high quality information as a means of helping you tune in and shape your worldview in a way that's going to positively impact your art. It doesn't necessarily need to be a passive process. You can do the same thing proactively. Perhaps maybe, as an athlete, you can do so maybe by modeling the approach to different movements after some of your favorite great athletes. Whether it be a batter taking a certain approach and modeling their stance and their swing and so on and so forth after their favorite hitter, or a dancer doing the same thing with their favorite choreographer or their favorite dancer, whatever the case may be. In the realm that I tend to focus in, which is painting, I do this through my long-term series called Study the Greats, and you'll see me kind of take on the process of making crude master copies of great art pieces done by folks like Monet and George Inness and others. So just a great way to kind of describe an integrated approach toward setting yourself up and priming yourself to always be in a position where you have an increased chance of creating quality art, at least the best art that that you can possibly create. And there's just so much more. So let's get into it here. Here we go. Make it up. So here we have one of those inflection points here within the book in this chapter, where there's more similarities than differences from the art of war. Here he talks about while emotional undercurrents of self-doubt being a big issue that's addressed in the art of war as well. He goes to say that while you're dealing with these undercurrents of self-doubt, they can serve the art. And they can also interfere with the creative process. Beginning a work, completing a work, and sharing the work, these are key moments where many of us become stuck. And actually, the most common area where folks become stuck who are creatives is sharing the work. So, what Rubin suggests is that you got to go through all three of those steps in the process, and you got to just do it, right? Even if your work is not where you want it to be, you got to go through all three steps, including sharing your work, because that clears the way for new ideas to make their way to the surface. And I agree, totally agree. I've seen that myself for years. I would produce work and I would just share it with, maybe one or two people, and put it away. And it would take a long time before I would work up the energy and the focus to be able to produce more. And since I've kind of developed a regular practice of sharing regularly, there's a little bit of a wave that forms, and you could just keep riding it by taking those three steps. All right, so I'll keep moving here. You can see my little notes, my little icons, arrows. Sometimes what I try to do is emphasize the main point of a particular section. Oftentimes I'll do that either with 3 stars clustered together along with 3 exclamation points or an exclamation point. Occasionally I'll feel a little bit more creative, and I might put a different kind of icon, like a bullseye or a shocked face. But the intention there is just to draw my attention to these areas when I'm walking through, the information again and looking either for inspiration or looking to remember more detail with regards to a reference point that I was interested in. You also see here, and again, I believe this came from the Tim Sanders book, Love is the Killer App. It may have come from a different source as well, but when I see something that kind of piques my interest, like this reference to the Latin kind of root inspirare, meaning to breathe in or blow into. When he's explaining, kind of the origins of the word of inspiration and describing how you can use inspiration to your advantage as opposed to waiting for it to come, and how you can kind of stoke the fires of inspiration and so on and so forth throughout this chapter. I just noted that. I thought it might be an interesting thing to follow up on. All right, so I know I sound like a broken record, but there is just so much, too much probably to reference within 20 minutes or a half an hour, but here's a nice one. This is found at the end of this section here, which I really enjoyed, where he focuses in on really how important it is to define in your own terms what success is. Not every actor is going to be a $20 million per movie actor. Not every athlete's going to sign the big contract for hundreds of millions of dollars. Not every artist is going to sell, paintings for six figures. So, it's a small percentage of the people that, attempt to make their way in these different fields of performance art, if you will, as a general category. So, really important to proactively take steps to define what success looks like for you, and it'll evolve over time. And then at the end of this chapter, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. And at the end of this chapter and the beginning of this next one, where we talk about, where Rick talks about connected detachment, which is definitely kind of a Zen Buddhism concept. Pretty much everything in here is. This little quote, in between about every other chapter, there's a nice quote like this. And I think this is, his idea. Maybe he borrowed it or kind of recast an original quote. But he says, if we can tune into the idea of making things and sharing them without being attached to the outcome, the work is more likely to arrive in its truest form. So I believe that to be an absolute truth. When we get caught up in what other people are going to think or trying to think about what the audience might like, we're kind of screwed before we even get started. All right. So there's tons. And we're not going to have enough time to get through all of it. But if you have this book and you've reviewed this book, and you have some key insights, if it's helped you in any way, I'd be interested to hear from you and how it's helped you out. Hearing other people's perspectives on a work like this can always be interesting and enlightening. So I'd be curious. I love this. We're dealing in a magic realm. Nobody knows why or how it works. Probably no other words have been more true. One of the other similarities between Rubin and his book here, the creative act, a way of being, as compared to Pressfield's book, The War of Art, is this idea that there's these ideas that are produced, oftentimes fully formed, perfectly formed. They're not our ideas, but they come to us. In Rubin's case, he refers to it as the source, from the source or the universe, very Zen. And in Pressfield, he talks about the muse as the source for inspiration and ideas. And those two items, whether it's the source or the muse, they're completely in control. They decide who gets rewarded with these great ideas, who gets rewarded for hard work. completely out of our control. We're just vessels or channels that kind of bring different works of art into this world. And again, they're gifted to us by either the source or the muse. So that's another intersection between these two books that are quite different in a number of ways. They're more different than the same, but in the key areas, they're very similar, like the one I just mentioned. And I decided to include them both in my personal canon, which I just wrote about recently on my blog, on my website at thomasmichaelneiman.com. I decided to include them both because they both provide an exceptional amount of inspiration and perspective. It can be very discouraging, trying to make your way as a creative. As a painter, there's millions of painters out there doing all kinds of different things, and so both of these I think are critical, for anybody that's looking to develop sustained progress, with their craft, especially along the lines of something like I just mentioned, like painting, landscape painting. It is a craft, and it can be a little defeating sometimes, so it's helpful to have these sorts of sources to sustain, again, perspective and motivation and inspiration, and that's what they do. So they're on my short list of 8 books or so that I draw from quite frequently, both The War of Art and this book here, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. All right. So here we go. Here's a good quote. One of those ones in between, and I did a little special icon here. Sometimes the mistakes are what makes a work great. Easy for me to say. Sometimes the mistakes are what makes work great. Humanity breathes in mistakes. Very true. I mean, sometimes the best works have obvious mistakes in them, and they end up being great because we have to solve problems related to those mistakes, or because they just make them more of our own work and more original. Perhaps maybe for a host of other reasons as well. Okay. All right, so I wrote it here, about a little more than halfway through. He was, what was he talking about here? So in this section, he's talking about openness and how it's really our responsibility to make sure that we stay open, to ideas and detach ourselves from our ego. And, I wrote Zen, ... Some really cool imagery. Here's an idea, in this chapter, the idea of surrounding the lightning bolt, and he goes on very descriptively to describe how, sometimes we become fixated when we see a good thunderstorm and get fixated on the actual lightning bolt, when in reality, the value from the standpoint of being a visual creature in the lightning bolt is it casts light on the areas surrounding the lightning bolt. So you'll see some really cool things in the clouds surrounding the lightning bolt, on the mountaintops and treetops, and on the plains, where the light actually is cast upon from that very lightning bolt. And if you stare at the lightning bolt, you're not going to see much. You're just going to be blinded. So he says it much more elegantly, and describes some practical application of that whole idea of not getting caught up at chasing shiny things, which I sometimes do. I mean, heck, I'm drawn to sunsets and sunrises and nocturne scenes with a nice bright moon reflecting light off of clouds, and sometimes those aren't the best works of art, right? So and there's a lot of practical stuff in here. The fact that being a creative and artist is really 24/7. You're going to expend a lot of energy. You can't really afford to be lazy. I love this one. Maybe the best idea is the one you're going to come up this evening. So that's the idea. You're always on the hunt. You're always on the hunt for the next good idea. All right. So again, we'll do a full 10-minute book summary. If we can jam all this helpful information into a 10-minute book summary. But that's what we plan on doing eventually. But I wanted to bring this to you much sooner and put it in the context of, the idea of, developing your own personal canon and how this fits within mine. And furthermore, how it fits in within one of the key pieces of literature that is part of my canon that I'm, kind of developing as a painter. And here are some of the others. I have them listed out again on my blog if you want, and links to all the 10-minute book reviews for each of these. But Edgar Payne's Composition of Outdoor Painting. Yep, The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, which I mentioned a bunch of times. Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. The Alchemist by Paul Coelho. Color and Light, James Gurney. Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting by John F. Carlson. So these and The Creative Act are books that I definitely would consider part of my canon, my go-to resources, and then there's a whole bunch of others that kind of support and will enter into this and provide information. One of those is Love is a Killer App by Tim Sanders, and that's kind of how I formulated my process for synthesizing the information in here that ends up in my 10-minute book reviews. So here we are. It is 30 minutes in. Somehow I got through that. I do want to show you just a couple of things here. So we're going to start. We'll start small, and we'll work our way up. But just want to walk through my journaling process. So I'd be lying if I said that there was a lot of intention behind this. Really, the way I got started, and I know a lot of folks are very intentional with their journaling efforts, and do some really intelligent things. In my case, I just didn't want to spend too much time away from more important things. I didn't want to spend too much time away from my family. I didn't want my process to interfere with work and other things. So I needed to find a way for those times where I was super busy and there were other more important things going on that I could still learn and progress with my art practice. So I started with these little mostly line drawings in this little journal. In this case, I think I got this one from Michael's, and I have another one that I'm going to fill up this year. But I use multicolored ballpoint pens, like this one. Sometimes highlighter, sometimes gesso, sometimes white out. And I'll just, draw little drawings like this. And last year, fortunately, I was able to fill this one up pretty good. And you could see there's quite a few drawings, lot of which I love. There's a lot of drawings in there that were a lot of fun to make and came out really nice. And in this case, this was preparation. It was a little thumbnail sketch for a puppy portrait or a dog portrait that I was commissioned to do, and I use this as preparation for that. Every now and again I'll do that. For some reason I really enjoy drawing dogs in this little format here. Anything, clouds, sometimes from photos, sometimes from direct observation. Sometimes they kind of fit into that study the greats category. This is pretty famous Monet painting that this was based off of. There's another one here too. I've done this one a couple times. And you could shift the format. So if you get bored with that little thumbnail sketch format, you can shift up a little bit. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of versatility. And again, you could do this. You don't need a lot of time to do a little drawing like that. You don't need a lot of space. Now, more recently, I was inspired to start a watercolor journal, and I've mentioned this a couple times on the channel, but this has been a lot of fun. It's mixed things up for me. I'm trying to, get to a better level of competency with watercolor, and I'm kind of learning in large part, self-teaching, but benefiting from good old YouTube and, great teachers like James Gurney. I've mentioned my cousin, Stephanie Berry. She does some wonderful gouache and watercolor work. This one was painted, this is actually a truck or a car studio painting. I like to think it was plein air because it was on site from direct observation during a snowstorm. I just happened to be sitting in the cab of my truck while I painted it. This was, there's a wall on our house, on the north side of our house, where there's no windows in the downstairs area, but we have some nice things along with our TV. This little Buddha figure on a shelf with this plant that I'm pretty sure my wife propagated and grew to a full-size plant. Another plant which was recently repotted, and then the piano, and this light was casting an interesting set of shadows and lights. So did that through direct observation using watercolor, and then more recently did a little kind of homage, if you will, to Winslow Homer. These are kind of loose copies, reduction, small little watercolors of some paintings he's done. He has a painting like this where there's actually 3 individuals on the vessel, and the waves are shaped a little bit differently, much larger waves, and there's a little boat in the background. The sky's arranged a little different, but I based it upon his work. Kind of fits in that study of the grades vein. This too is based upon loosely a Winslow Homer painting, and this is in watercolor. All these are completely done in watercolor. So I'm looking to fill this up. And then finally, last thing, I have been working at these a little bit longer, and I'm usually getting maybe 2 or 3 of these going at any one time. We have these oil painting journals. This I learned, I think, from Cesar Santos. So he's another go-to resource on YouTube. He does some amazing work, just about every genre, mostly oil painting, incredible portrait artist. But he kind of turned me on to the advantages of just taking archival quality paper, acid-free paper, gessoing it, letting it dry, and you can gesso a couple of pages at a time typically, and you could use it as a vehicle to practice oil painting, and it helps with the challenges related to storage. If I had a bunch of stretched canvases filled with paintings, they take up a lot of space. Heck, even canvas that's just plain old canvas that's not on stretcher bars. So this allows me to, get some work in. This was painted from direct observation, backyard, early in the morning before daybreak, immediately following the first storm this year. The first painting that I showed you was actually a Study of the Greats series painting. It was Charles Warren Eaton study. Here's another one. I forget, to be honest with you, who I modeled this after, this little angel figure, but I think it's actually an excerpt from, I forget, some famous painting. But anyway, you could view, I think, time-lapsed video of me creating this on my channel if you take a look. And there's more. There's a lot more. Some rough. This is, I think, intended to be like an old-timey baseball card. Native American chief in a headdress, monochromatic. Here's a little landscape painting. This was kind of preparation for a commission. This is a local stream nearby, Broadhead Creek. Late summer, early fall. It was a beautiful day. And a little direct observation, little reference photo usage, and there's a ton more. So let's see here. This is part of my studio. This is a photo from early morning trip that we took. So this book is pretty much, I would say, about halfway filled up. I have another book going, and this is with oil paints. And you know, if I want to, I can turn these into larger works. This was actually the view from the top of the bleachers while attending a soccer game up at I think Pocono Mountain North. So nice sunset scene off into the distance on a high mountain plain area. A little crazy portraiture here. So sometimes you just have fun. Sometimes it's, just like with that smaller sketch pad and the line drawings, it's a way to bang out some work really quickly and do so in a way that doesn't expend a ton of expensive resources. This is plein air, a little stream from a little over a year back, partially frozen over with some snow. And then this is a Study of the Greats painting. This is based upon a George and S. painting of the Delaware Water Gap. And it's actually one of the first times that it might be the first oil painting journal entry that I ever made. So anyway, just wanted to take you through that. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you're interested at all in, how I use any of these or how you might be able to incorporate any of these or any of the kind of process behind, developing, for example, these gesso pages within an oil painting journal like this, feel free to reach out. I'll try to address your questions. In addition to that, oftentimes there's content on my channel that will, describe quite nicely how these processes are actually executed, and you might find those helpful as well. So anyway, thanks for checking this out, and appreciate you checking out the content on my channel. I will put notes regarding some of the book summaries that are related to today's session and other elements that we covered in the notes section of the recorded version of this video. And hope you stay well, and hope to see you again sometime soon. Cheers.